Thanks so much for coming out tonight. My name is Dominick Cocozza, and I'm one of the Arts Kinship members here at Aunty's house. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a brief introduction into our space. For those if this is your first time to Aunty's house, we are a Providence-based community studio, arts kinship and exhibition space founded in 2023 by Lily Many Colors, who you might see floating around tonight. In addition to that, Lily is a mother, auntie, and lecturer at Rhode Island School of Design, and this space centers parent artists, youth, programming, and prioritizes care politics built on transgenerational liberation. We center free programs, youth exhibitions, and we're aimed at making education accessible for all. Before we get started again, I want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the outpouring, wonderful feedback and reception of my show that we're currently in right now. This is the closing event for the show that's been up for about 3 weeks now, and it's titled Me Acuerdo, I Remember, and it'll come down on November 6th, so that's going to be on Thursday. But this project would not have been possible without our Auntie's house kinship here, Lily, Jesse, Shinpei, Noah, Aaron, and Subi. All of their work has been super integral to making the installation happen, from painting the walls to helping me with tech support, printing, and all of the above. I want to, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest panelist here tonight. In addition to this being an artist talk, I also wanted it to be a panel discussion where I invited some folks in the community who are leading voices who have been super inspirational for me in putting together this show. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce. Next to me is Tiana Ochoa Teo, who is a dedicated clinical social worker, public servant, and community advocate who is committed to promoting equity, cultural pride, and community well-being. As a first-generation immigrant from Guatemala, Tiana moved here at the age of 16, and providing her with both the lived experiences and professional expertise to inform her work. With 2 decades of experience in social services, Tiana has championed programs that help children and families overcome barriers, build resistance, and thrive. She is actively involved in the Providence Tourism Council, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Rhode Island, and the City of Providence Board of Licenses, bringing a social work perspective to these organizations. As the president of the Guatemalan Center of New England, how I met Tiana, Tiana leads initiatives that celebrate Guatemalan heritage, promote community unity, and under her leadership, the center has become an essential platform for cultural exchange and the advocacy of our local Guatemalan community here in Providence. Can we just give a warm round of applause for Tiana? And next to Tiana, I have María Fernanda Mancera, who is an art historian and writer based in Bogotá, Colombia, currently residing in Providence, Rhode Island. She is the current assistant curator of Indigenous Art at the RISD Museum, and her research is focused on contemporary art in the Americas and the Caribbean, primarily exploring themes of performance, gender, ecology, and organizing. Her work reflects on the power of making and crafting as a process of knowledge transmission, continuity, and placekeeping. Previously, she has worked at the Curatorial Fellow at Tufts University Art Galleries and co-curated the SMFA Juried Exhibition at the MFA Boston. Most recently, she has curated the group exhibition Worlds at the Providence College Galleries, which will actually be having a gallery tour and public reception next Wednesday on November 12th from 5 to 7 p.m. So hope to see you guys again there soon. I'm honored to be moderating tonight's discussion and welcome our guest speakers from who are incredible leaders who will be sharing some of their experiences and wisdom with us tonight. Our conversation for this evening is both in response to my solo exhibition, but also feeling the need to inspire our community here in Providence. So I'm really interested in bringing this arts and culture dialogue together. I will have, as you can probably see, I wrote a little bit of an introduction here, but most of the talking will be from our panelists, and I'll have some prepared questions, but there will also be some time at the end for Q&A. So if there are any lingering thoughts there at the top, please feel free to linger on those thoughts, and then when I ask them, of course, we'll be welcoming of audience participation. All right. Finally, I just wanted to, again, give a warm round of applause and welcome to our panelists here tonight. So this exhibition is my first solo exhibition. I've been kind of pondering on a lot of these ideas for a while, and seeing it come together with the community and people helping me with all of the installation has just been amazing. I graduated from RISD in 2024 from painting, and this work has been, 2 of the paintings were works that I did in studio while I was at RISD, and then the rest of the paintings have been pretty much coming from this year in 2025, when I met with Lily and we kind of started to talk about, maybe doing programming in this space would be a good idea. And so that's one of the great things here about Auntie's house, is that those of us who are Arts Kinship members, we are caring for the space, we're doing different types of programming, we meet every month, and it's just been a really beautiful community and a way to also connect outside of art school when sometimes that community can be lost. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started with our first question. Our event title tonight is titled Artist Dialogues, Finding Community and Home Through Art. And my first question for our 2 panelists here is, Auntie's house is a place of home, multidisciplinary practice, and non-extractive programming. And so, keeping that in mind, with the theme tonight, how does the theme Finding Community and Home Through Art resonate with you? So go ahead and get started from there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dominick, again, for inviting us and for having us here and for sharing this space with us and giving us this opportunity to share the space with everyone present here tonight. This question made me think long and hard after you shared it, because I feel like I was just thinking from where did I want to approach it. I mean, I feel like in general terms, when I started working in the arts, you always get to find particular communities that you enjoy working with, who maybe, and people who share your thoughts and your same ideas, and you can grow these little ideas into dreams and you can dream with them. But the idea of home was never on my mind. Well, as I reflected on this question, I was like, the first time I started thinking of home was when I moved here. So 6 years ago, before 2019, I didn't really have the need to think about finding home through art because I was home. And when I moved here, I found that there were not many spaces for Latin American and Colombians like myself to gather. Even though Providence is a really diverse place in many ways, I also really couldn't find Spanish or my food or, not even Colombian artists at the museum. Even though we do have them in the collection, but I guess that's kind of the point. So I started slowly, and it has been a very slow process, reaching out to people, trying to find community, and this has not happened in through institutional spaces yet. It has been easier to do it through community spaces like this one, or in Boston, I worked for this amazing organization called Urbano Project, and they worked with youth from Boston public schools, and many of them were actually Colombian, but also Guatemalan, and their first language was Spanish. And so we shared that, and we shared those opportunities of making and speaking our language. So that was really nice. So that's how the question resonated with me.
Thank you. Again, Dominic, thank you for the opportunity to share space and time with all the wonderful people here today. And so as I reflect on this question and the work that we are trying to accomplish as part of the Guatemalan Center, I think of home not necessarily as a physical space, but rather as a safe space that we can create for community, for folks that can come into, whether it's our office or whether it's an event that we've organized and we welcome folks. And so additionally, for artists that are willing to collaborate with us to ensure that we are creating intention not only in the space but in the collaborations, so that folks feel welcome and they feel like they belong when they come into these spaces or these activities. And so ensuring again that it is safe and is welcoming, and that whether it's through language or through music or through whatever we're doing, that it resonates with people and that they are willing to engage and come back. And even as I reflect on things like the festival that we host annually, it is an event that when people leave, they speak of how they felt when they were and they participated in the activity itself. And I think that we're not only trying to welcome Guatemalans to our events and into our spaces, but everyone who's willing to engage. And so again, it's all about safety and welcome, making people feel welcome and creating a sense of belonging.
That's wonderful, both of you guys. I love that you both touched on home maybe as a place that's not a physical space, but some place that can travel with you, and you're kind of able to search for that and think about that on a day-to-day basis. It was actually a really great segue into the next kind of question and theme that I'm thinking about, which is language, and how language is also perhaps a way into home or thinking about home. As this presentation and this exhibition, a lot of the works have been reflecting on the Guatemalan worry doll as almost a conduit for myself to think about my own stories, my own lineage, and as an adoptee, as someone who was adopted from Guatemala in 2001, and then raised in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, and then coming up here to Providence, where there's such a huge Guatemalan population that is just amazing and so talented. And so I'm thinking about different ways where perhaps the paintings have become a really nice middle ground for me to negotiate in between perhaps finding an aspect of culture that I wasn't able to maybe explore growing up. And so it wasn't until 2022 when I made my journey back to Guatemala for the first time in 20 years actually, and it was really interesting to be back in that space and also somehow feel like an outsider. And so the works have become, again, a really beautiful opportunity for me to contribute and be active in that cultural scope in a way where maybe I wasn't able to before. And so I'm interested, maybe we can go further into that discussion about language. For both of you, this can be something that we could talk about in your arrival to Providence, or it could also be something that influenced you growing up. But what has been your experience with language and finding community and or creating a safe space for belonging? And perhaps were there multilingual spaces where you felt you went to in starting to enter into that?
Yeah, okay, so I have actually a very tricky relationship with Spanish right now, because you imagine that sometimes like when you migrate, your life turns around, and so you're now living in English, working in English, thinking in English, everything is in English, and you actually start losing not your ability to speak your language, but there's so many ways, your ability to maybe convey things in Spanish as easily as you used to. Like that happens, and that's a real and very sad thing. Obviously, again, when I was in Boston before, so not many opportunities to speak Spanish except with the students I was mentioning before. But then again, when I moved here, the Spanish-speaking community is larger, so it's amazing when I meet someone new and I learn that they speak Spanish, it seems that the relationship building goes, like it just happens in an easier way. I mean, it happened to us. Yes. So speaking Spanish actually has become something that's like sacred for me. Like I speak it at home with my husband, I speak it with my parents and my friends, but I don't really have many more opportunities to just speak the language. And I have been thinking about that in the sense that when you are away from home and you want to find community and home through art, there's so many other nonverbal languages that you can develop, as you have done here with the show. Even like they can be visual, like this, where you're like referencing garments, colors, works, objects that speak to like this place, and you're longing for this place, and someone else will see those and maybe they'll share that same sentiment. And that's kind of like the language of care that I think it's very important. So obviously there's more ways to communicate. At the same time, I really get bummed. I always talk about this, but my mom does not speak Spanish, and whenever she comes to visit, there's no spaces to which I can take her, that she can feel that she's actually like learning something, or that she belongs, or that I don't have to like translate for her and like make her feel that she has like this access barrier to kind of like understanding or enjoying or experiencing something. So, yeah.
Language is an interesting concept for me because my primary language is Spanish. I moved here when I was almost 16, and so it was an interesting transition for me as I realized that, English became at some point my first language, and I started to think and dream and all of that in English, and it was a very interesting process for me, to the point that when I went to college, I pursued a double major and ensured that one was in Spanish, because I wanted to preserve the language as a means of, again, holding that part of me and in that identity. And so being bilingual has been wonderful in a sense that it allows for so many things, but it's interesting in this space that in the work that we do, that we have that ability to connect with our newcomers, new immigrants in their native language, and not just Spanish, but also being able to have other languages like Quiche as part of folks who are part of our organization, and to be able to see those transitions between languages and that engagement with folks in a different language that is Spanish and English has been so inspirational, and also it emphasizes again the importance that without being intentional in having these opportunities and being able to communicate with folks, you really can't make that connection and that engagement that you're looking to achieve. And so language truly is a form of connection and power. And so how do we maintain that, and how do we then also try to ensure that second, third generation of, immigrants, whether it be Guatemalans or what have you, that they're able to maintain that connection to language. And so that's one thing that has been on my mind. How can we as an organization contribute in that space and that opportunity to ensure that, and actually just this weekend someone said, do you guys teach Spanish? My kids speak some Spanish, but I want them to become fluent. And that's been on my mind for at least 4 to 5 years, and I often talk about this, but we haven't done anything intentionally to truly make that a program and or create access to that. And so, I think that it's needed, and it's something that, as an organization that's trying to promote culture and heritage, it's something that we should absolutely focus on as well.
That's really beautiful, especially I think as someone who doesn't speak Spanish and maybe spoke a little bit when I was really young, and then got reintroduced to it in high school and in middle school and even in elementary school, and just could not pick it up, depending. And it might have been just the context for which I was being immersed into it. I think especially as someone who is Guatemalan, born Guatemalan, indigenous, and being completely outside of that, and in a classroom or in a space where I was in a very predominantly English-speaking space. And so I think it's something that I am always talking about with other adoptees. Is I've been definitely having a constant dialogue with folks that might be saying, oh, you speak so well, or will speak to me in Spanish first. That's been the first thing that anyone has ever said to me when I was growing up. And it was always I had to have an answer. I had to have a really eloquent answer from the get-go about sometimes maybe just explaining to someone why I wasn't able to do that. So it's interesting having the reverse and thinking about it from that perspective, because I feel like as someone who doesn't have that, that is the one thing that I've been, before I go away into the universe, I want to be able to have some of that language back with me. So I'm hoping that through the work and through the art, it's really opened up a lot of opportunities for me to reconnect with that culture, that lineage, and also perhaps potentially bringing me back to that homeland so that I can re-immerse myself in that.
And if I may, Dominick, the first time that I actually reached out to Dominick on Instagram, I wrote this lengthy paragraph in Spanish about my excitement of learning about his work and the wanting to collaborate. And he responds in English, of course, and says, I'm sorry if my response is not thorough. I'm trying to translate your text. To which I said, I'm so sorry, I do speak English as well, but I was just so excited that when I'm excited about something, I immediately just go back to Spanish. And so that was sort of an interesting first interaction that we had.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a very fun thing that I definitely reflect on again. Especially, I'm always trying to make sure it's definitely a DM. Sometimes you can't really read tone or you can't read the language as well, so sometimes I'll respond in Spanish, but I try to have, a response that warrants my being. All right, so seeing both of you are really inspiring in a variety of different ways, but my next question is maybe more of just a logistical professional practice question. But how did you get into the career that you're currently in, and were there things that maybe led you to that growing up? Maybe, for example, I was never really surrounded with people that understood the arts, but I did, which is again never a guarantee, but I was raised in a family where my parents were supportive of me learning, so they kind of did the work to try to introduce me to different aspects of painting, drawing, and then even from that, it was never, Dominic, you can't be a painter. They never said that. It was more of, okay, we have no idea what being a painter means, but we'll help you kind of start to maybe do some of these extracurriculars that would introduce me to other aspects of painting as a career. Might it be business, getting out of my comfort zone as maybe someone who's a more introverted person, and so finding different ways to get, I guess, me here as a painter. So I guess to restate the question is just, what was something that has led you to your career that you're currently in?
So I think that whether it's the arts or community work, I think that these career paths are deeply rooted on like your own lived experiences, and so as an immigrant, as the daughter of hardworking parents that migrated here when we were very young, I always felt a sense of commitment to ensuring that anything that I did was work that was in service of the community. And so social work is what was my calling, and so that's my profession. But I've been able to, the work that we do through the Guatemalan Center is rooted in well-being and caring for our Guatemalan community, migrant community. And so I think that for me, even though I'm not an artist, nor I find myself to be particularly talented in any of that, but I do think that I have skills that, where I'm able to plan and execute things, and so that's my contributions, right, as part of this organization. And when I collaborate with artists or other organizations in the arts, is that, I want to make sure that as much as the work that I do in my day-to-day job, that what we do as an organization promoting art and culture and heritage is rooted in social justice, is rooted in promotion of well-being, is rooted in uplifting our community, and that it has impact, that it has meaning, and that aligns with the values of what I do in my day-to-day job. And so I think that that's what's important, right? That whatever you do, that it's in alignment with your values and the things that you're passionate about, because then it doesn't feel like heavy lifting, it doesn't feel like it's hard work, because you are passionate about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say that my dad had a heart attack when I told him that I was gonna go to art school. Obviously, the context in Colombia is very different. Like, Colombia is a very poor country, and so like just imagining you making your way through an arts career it takes a lot, and it's really difficult. But it actually has been very nice to see him start being in relation to like the work that I'm doing, and like reading my papers, and like being interested in this work or like this other. That has been very touching. I grew up going to this museum that's called Museo del Oro, and it holds one of the largest collections of gold ornaments made by different indigenous communities, most of which no longer exist, and some of which do. So there has also been recent efforts, or there have been recent efforts to do repatriation work, getting like all of these gold ornaments and vases and ritual belongings back to the communities. But this is a museum that basically everyone in Bogotá visits, and it has this amazing room in which you go and you can sit on the floor, and they turn the light off, and then you start hearing sounds from all of the like ecosystems that we have. So from the jungle, the mountains, the beaches, and the big trees start like lighting up, and you see like this little teeny tiny frogs made out of gold, and then like the larger bases start to appear, and it's just so magical. I was actually talking about this today during a meeting, but for good and bad, in Colombia we grow up with indigenous histories being very embedded in our national identity, and that is of course a project. But when you go to a museum and you're 8, you don't challenge that. But as I grew up and I started pursuing art history, I had the amazing opportunity to work with a couple of professors whose research interests were pre-Hispanic art. So that gave me the chance to actually learn what other people are doing to, one, challenge those histories, and two, kind of like give voices to communities whose voices have been silenced. And yeah, so right now I feel like that's the work that I'm trying to do really hard at the museum. And yes, just to echo what you're saying, I feel like the most important thing is that the work you're doing aligns with your values, and sometimes it can be very hard, but it's also very rewarding.
Yes, I definitely echo everything that was just mentioned. I think, especially when we're doing even programs like this, I'm thinking of, one of the first things I'm thinking about is accessibility and who is the event for. And even one of our Auntie's kin had mentioned to me right before this conversation, and we were just talking about the aspect of, oh, is this like a kids-friendly event? And I actually had to think about that. It wasn't something in my being where I was like, oh, is this gonna be a kids event, or how do I make that an accessible point for younger folks to understand? And so that's always something that's maybe in the back of my mind, where I'm hoping that even spaces like this can be open and generative to a wide variety of people, and you can take something from that. So with both of you, because you both are doing different aspects of organizing, whether it be community organizing, community leadership, how is it on maybe the organizing end for you and your experience in connecting with some of these groups of people and prioritizing them, whether they be families, folks that maybe English is not their first language, maybe just bringing other groups of people and making it an accessible point. So either if that's an organization, or maybe even from an institution standpoint, what is it like on the other end and starting to try to create space for that?
So I mentioned Urbano in Boston. That's like the first time, the first time that I got to experience working with community here in the US. And during the pandemic, we held most of the programs virtually, so that meant that people didn't have to move or commute to certain spaces. But then when the world opened up again, we started stumbling into like obstacles. So like students couldn't make it to X or Y place because they didn't have a car or they couldn't commute. At the same time, Urbano was offering these opportunities to students who didn't have access to art as an extracurricular activity. So, for example, for Urbano, we started thinking, what's the most important thing that needs to happen before the art making? And that was making sure that people had access to transportation and access to food. So that was kind of like the ensuring basic needs were met, led to more people showing up and feeling that they were ready to spend 4 hours making art because they had food, they had transportation, and they also had a stipend, so they could also bring something back home. So that was very important, like meeting people's needs and like understanding that sometimes you want to run a program, but like people have actual like basic human needs beforehand. Language also, obviously, it's a tool, as you were saying, to communicate. Sometimes it's the only tool that you have to make a first approach and like reach out to a community. So that's also important. Like, I feel like people appreciate when you speak their language and like can communicate with them and also like share, I don't know, inside jokes or just like understand ways of pronouncing certain words, and also shared histories. I think that that has happened a lot to me. Like, even though I'm Colombian, I feel like there's so many shared histories, ways of speaking, foods, across the Latin American region, and that's also like a way to connect with people and invite them into a space where you can share and be in community. But I will say that when that doesn't happen, and that can also happen, and you don't speak someone else's language, or you are not in any way either like part of their community or don't have the knowledge to approach them, I feel like just being very careful with and being very mindful about the bridge that you're extending, have it be, what's the word for that? Like not true, but like genuine, like and authentic. And I think that takes time, and I feel that that requires wearing your heart on your sleeve and like understanding that sometimes there's also many like historic circumstances that not necessarily help, but like may slow your approach, and that's okay. I feel like that's an important thing to like understand, that not everything has to happen on your timeline. It just takes time.
So I agree about that piece of that cross-cultural empathy, right, that we need to be able to create in spaces for people, because sometimes the barrier is not language, or sometimes the barrier is not, like a tangible thing that we can perhaps try to fix. But so intentionality in whatever we do, how we engage people, the language, the description of programming. Sometimes, we need to keep in mind about that we get excited about projects and then we make them this big thing, and then is that coming across? Are people connecting with the messaging, with the goal of a project and or a program? And so while we know that the only way to ensure that folks feel welcome into spaces is by creating it, making sure that it's safe, but also trying to connect in the language that that we have access to. And so one of the things that at the Guatemalan Center that we intentionally thought about was representation, right? And so how are we ensuring that when folks look within the organization and within everything that we do they feel represented? Do they feel respected, valued? And so ensuring that we take all of those things under consideration when we are connecting with artists and organizations that we want to collaborate. Are they in alignment with what we do? And do they share the same values? Ensuring that we are valuing their time and work, and while resources are limited, still making an intentional effort to still value people's time and efforts and artistry and all of that. And so I think that all of those things are important in the work that we're trying to accomplish.
I think all of those points are super important, especially when you're working with folks that you don't know, or you don't know your background, just like you said, that mindfulness, I think is definitely super important and something that I'm thinking about as someone who is just now starting to collaborate and do different types of partnerships with organizations. That leads us to a wonderful segue into our next question, which is around the relationship with artists. Like how do artists, can they be that conduit or hold that story and do that kind of mindfulness approach to that work? And I was fortunate at the beginning of this year when I first met Tiana, right from the get-go, we just started to have a conversation about doing some sort of collaboration. We weren't really sure what the collaboration would be yet, but we just knew that, it probably, in my mind, my first thing that I think about is a studio visit. So I invited Tiana for a studio visit after we had a couple phone calls, and Tiana got a chance to see the work while it was taking place. I don't think this had started yet, but I had just come back from a couple of residencies and was still getting settled into here at Aunty's house. And when we were thinking about the program, we were, again, like you said, we were trying to identify different needs for the community. And so what we ended up landing on was a youth program where we were doing the Guatemalan worry dolls. And I put together like a little syllabus where it was a kind of 5-week class for on a younger end, I think they might have been 6. And then for older end, they might have been 15. So it was all ages. So we didn't really know who was gonna come. We just wanted to extend that invitation here at Aunty's house. And so over the summer, we again met a couple more times to think about that program. And then when it came down to it, it was just, again, a really amazing opportunity to extend the work off of the painting and into a tangible form that could inspire our youth, and also on my end to be a wonderful way to just give back and be in community with everyone. And so that leads us to, again, the question of artists. So on both of your ends, I know you talked about a little bit about your community values and making sure that artists are aligned with your mission. But my main question is, how do you discover artists? Like, where does that entry point for you? And I know it might be different for each of you, but I know you found me on Instagram, but maybe for other people too, what is that like? And how do you start to form that relationship?
I stalk him on Instagram. I'm kidding. No, so I usually find folks on social media, right? Because the algorithm knows exactly where to send me. So, but it always becomes about, once we connect with artists and if there's a connection to Guatemala or the work that we're trying to accomplish, I'm always interested in bringing folks in because we want to, again, ensure that there's representation. And, one of your students is here today. Emily is around, one of the students that was here in the summer class that we hosted. That was such a beautiful workshop, truly, for these kids. And for us, access is a thing. We know that a lot of kids from, Black and brown communities don't have access to the arts, so be able to have someone in front of them that, looks like them. And so that's important to us. And so we've done a few of these things in the past. And so to have a RISD graduate that is doing amazing work, that has the cultural, is culturally relevant, right? And that was important. And so we're always looking for those opportunities to collaborate with artists, and they don't necessarily have to be Guatemalan. Any artist who's willing to say, I have an opportunity to do a workshop or do this, or, we welcome folks because, again, we want to ensure that kids have access. And the kids that came to the program here, they weren't all Guatemalan, and that was also important because while, that's typically the community we serve, there were kids from other places. And we ensure that they feel welcome and that they know that they're welcome to participate in the different things that we do. And every other program that we've done this past year, everyone from the community is welcome to participate. And so access, representation, those things are important in alignment with, values, and folks who, are truly interested in engaging with communities that are going through different struggles, our immigrant community, for instance. And so anyone, if you're an artist and you're here today and you want to collaborate, call me.
I think similarly, the question about how do you discover artists is like in events like this. And like going to shows and just showing up for your community. There's so many amazing spaces here in Providence and just like across Rhode Island, if we're speaking specifically to Rhode Island, where you can go and show up for your community and you'll learn more about different artists working currently here, or maybe not, just for visiting. I met you. Shout out to Leslie. She's my colleague at the museum, but we have become good friends, and she actually introduced me to Dominick. And maybe I would have found out about your work in a different way, like you had maybe opened the show, and then I don't know, would have come to the opening. But I feel like establishing those relationships are, everything is based on, I think, having meaningful relationships, and like the fruits of that are meeting amazing people. And I feel like, to the question of advice to collaborate with artists, I would say that just being very mindful about their time and like respecting the person that you're meeting for a studio visit. And if you are going there, just reading about their work, having like mindful questions, but also I feel like very importantly, being a conscious listener. And so you are sometimes like, when you approach a work or like an artist as a curator, you have so many thoughts like going across through your head, because you're seeing works and artists and all that all the time. But I think that just sitting and listening to someone just speak and actively listening without saying anything, that's very valuable. And I also think that we just have lost the capacity of doing that because of the world that we live in. So just giving someone your full attention, it's an act of care and respect.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, like you both said, a lot of the times where I'm meeting new people, it's through introductions. So, Leslie's here, and Leslie introduced me to Maria because I just went to the RISD grad show this year, and that's something that I'll always go to. And I know I have some, like, a fellow alumni painter, Michael, here, who's here supporting me, and Maddie, who's here supporting me. And I have some like co-workers here, and I just had like a great studio visit with Tori, who came to visit the show, and we were talking about this exact question about making those meaningful relationships and also showing up, I think, is something that's always really difficult, especially now as, again, practicing mindfulness, making sure that we're first in a mindset where we can actually engage. But then if you are able to do that, it's really wonderful to start to meet people. And I always tell people that I always just put something on my calendar, and if I can get to it, I can get to it, and usually I can. But it's a lot of those times those invitations too. I feel like I'm constantly just reaching out to people, and none of this would have also been possible if I wasn't comfortable with asking for help, because again, this is an artist-run space, and we're also running on limited money too. So when folks really were very, very generous in donating their time and being here in the space, that's kind of, again, started to bring this exhibition to life. is having that dream, but then also getting folks involved every step of the way. So, in addition to that, I'm interested because we do have some young people here and maybe also people that, I don't know, I always like to say that, I don't know what the statistic is, but folks tend to change their career a lot, right? So that's kind of a given. So perhaps what advice would you give to someone who's interested in potentially like social change, community engagement, also acknowledging that what we talked about community values, how sometimes those are really important to the work that we do. So I guess, how would you advise maybe someone who's coming to you and is interested in maybe doing what you're doing? What would be that first piece of advice that you would give to them to help them succeed in that?
So I think that engaging within your community, it's a really great first step, right? To just understand sort of the needs of your community and also what are the things that resonate with you, right? Whether it's, activism or, being a social worker or being an artist or what have you. So being open to asking questions, connecting with people, being able to volunteer your time if you can to specific causes that perhaps you're excited about. Or I think one of the issues when we again talk about access is that a lot of youth or young adults perhaps don't have the opportunity as other folks do to do internships or do certain things that allows you to explore career paths. Sometimes if you went to a school where that wasn't necessarily a priority as part of curriculum or what have you. When you lack means, you also lack access to human capital and connections and those things, and those become barriers, right? As you trying to enter spaces or explore certain things. And so I think that inevitably our Black and brown communities kind of enter career paths with limited information or opportunities to truly explore if that's really what they want to do. And so mentorship is another thing that is so important. And so how do we ensure that kids have access to that, to mentorship? I think that the equalizer for me as an immigrant, who barely could put sentences together in English as I entered college, had I not had those mentors, I don't think that I would have been able to truly succeed academically and professionally, right? And be able to be in position of leadership roles. But all of that has been through, sure, hard work, yes, and resilience and all of those things, but also that mentorship that is so important and opportunities. And so not a lot of people have that. And so we need to create those spaces as organizations, as institutions, to ensure that kids have access to that, so that they can also see themselves in people who are successful and who have had opportunity and can be their mentors or their guidance. So I think that it's ensuring that we are promoting that within our communities to ensure that kids are not afraid to ask for help and to connect and to seek opportunities, and but also we have to make sure that those opportunities exist so that they can have access to them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like mentorship is very important. And reciprocity as well, right? Like if you I think that like throughout your life, you will always have like really good mentors who are very generous with their time, with their knowledge, and they're sharing it with you, and they're helping and supporting you, whether like personally or professionally. And so being reciprocal, not only in like that one-to-one, but also like how can I become a mentor myself if someone needs that of me? How can I share my time, my knowledge? Not everything has to be an extractive relationship. I feel like studio visits are like a good example of that. Like you can actually just be open to supporting an artist or supporting a maker, sharing your time, your knowledge, whatever that person needs, questions. I think that's like one important thing. I would say also that working with teenagers, it's amazing, and that actually kind of like shifted my the orientation of my career. Like right now, obviously doing a lot of curatorial work, it's kind of like very siloed. Like you work with your colleagues, you think about public programming, and like from a very like this kernel of an idea that someone else working in public programming grows, but you get to be a part of it and like work with people. And I feel like in terms of, it's like especially speaking to community engagement and social change, I feel like it's a very scary time right now, and I feel like just working youth tend to be very hopeful and see like silver linings and have this like conversations about change much more openly or not as like pessimistically, and just like thinking into the future. I think that working with kids and with teenagers is a really good thing. If you want to start just like volunteering your time or just understanding the importance of education if you want to work in the arts.
Yes. Yes, I think that giving back is so important, and I'll just shout out one quick thing that the Guatemalan Center is doing right now, which is just a collaboration that we have just done, which is, one, Tiana and Caesar, who's the husband around, have been just wonderful supporters of my work and have now 2 of my paintings actually. And this one that I recently found a new home with Tiana is on a tote bag and some t-shirts.
Can we display the tote bag,
I think there's a tote bag in this.
In the t-shirt in the back.
Yes.
And the tote bag is right here.
Amazing.
Thank you for your purchase.
Yes. So that was something that we were talking about because the Guatemalan Center has always been very important in the way that they've been giving back to the community, specifically with college or folks that are going into school and the scholarship that would help them get to that spot. So we're actually doing a joint fundraiser right now where all of the proceeds from that are going to help that. And they actually have their award gala in January 30th. And that's where they do give the awards out for that. So that's just a wonderful example. So I think we'll have time for one more quick question, and then we'll go to a Q&A. So if you have any lingering thoughts, so feel free to just kind of start to think about that if you'd like to ask anyone any question. But to end off our just program for tonight, maybe if you could just share something with the audience that is something you're working on right now that you're excited about. So I know you guys both are so busy, have such busy, amazing, crazy lives. But it could be a recent thing that happened in the past 2 weeks, or it could be something in the future that you're working on that you're allowed to share.
So in the spirit of collaboration, we just finished a several-month collaboration with a Guatemalan artist, Magda Leon, who is here somewhere. There you are, Magda. Magda is a fantastic local artist who I met in Somerville, Massachusetts back in March, not in Providence. We live like 5 minutes away from each other, but never crossed paths in Rhode Island. I met her in Massachusetts. We started talking about the work that we do. I got very excited, of course, when I'm looking at her screen prints and hearing about her own personal story, how she changed her career to pursue her true passion, which is art. And so I was so inspired to hear that and to learn about her. And so we met, we chatted a few times, and from that, we created this community project, which is to build these giant kites that were in Expo just this past weekend. And so giant kites is a tradition in Guatemala that is celebrated the 1st of November. Typically they're flown. They don't give us permits to do that here, so we couldn't do it. But they were in a gallery where people could come and see them. But what was beautiful about this project is that while Magda was creating this idea for this large long-term project that she has with the Whaling Museum in New Bedford, we were alongside, without meeting each other, thinking about how do we harness this kite making as a way to bring people together and celebrate culture and heritage. And so, the stars aligned and we met, and then we created this amazing program where we have engaged hundreds of people in a span of 5 months, and all the artists who collaborated in that process. We have Nilton Cardenas, who's not Guatemalan, he's from Peru, but he was so excited to hear about the project and came and joined and was part of this community. And so I think that when there's alignment and when there's passion behind a project, we didn't know how we were gonna make it work, but we did, and it has been widely successful, and it's been so transformative and so rewarding. And so I share that because, if you have an idea, a dream, a goal, and it's a matter of just aligning those right people around you that will support it and that will help you, reach the end line or the goal. And so we have been so excited because we don't think that the project has ended, even though we have, the exhibition ended very successfully with hundreds of people in attendance. There's more to that, right? That we are thinking, how do we keep it going? Because the engagement is there, the excitement is there, and not just from Guatemalans. We learned that the kite making is something that it's kind of the thread across cultures. We met this wonderful young man from India that came down from Boston, and he was sharing about his experience of kite making in India. We were delighted by that as well. And so this project has brought people from